Hello and welcome to another edition of the Aces Loaded podcast. As always, it is great to have you with us. My name is Zack Bayrouty, joined by Vince Ruffino, usually producing the pod for us. He's going to co-host today. Second appearance as the co-host for Vince, who's up in Reno right now with the nice Greater Nevada field backdrop, which is making me thirsty for baseball. If you're watching on the video, that is. How you doing, man?
It's great to be here, Zach. I'm doing well. You know, Reno's starting to open up again, and we're getting back into the office. So for us, starting to get some sort of normalcy, even though it's still a scary world out there, and you need to take precautions, and we are. That's been really nice, and being able to reconnect with coworkers and just kind of get back into it has been really good, really great for us.
I can imagine. By the way, we're going to have Ryan Radtke on. He is our guest, the original voice of the Aces. Still, you could make the argument the current voice of the Aces because he was the last guy to call an Aces game. So Rads is going to join us, and I know everybody loves hearing from Ryan, and he'll talk about his thoughts on obviously what's going on. We'll get into the mechanics of why Ryan is such an amazing broadcaster, and I know everybody feels that way, especially in Reno, but we'll kind of get into the weeds as to, his formula for doing things and what his influences were. It's a great time we're going to have with Rads, but looking forward to chatting with him soon. What's it like in the office right now when you do go? Is there an eeriness still, or does it feel normal?
It's starting to feel a little bit more normal. I think at first when we started to go back a week or two ago, with assigned dates and times and things of that nature, it was a little eerie and weird. Everything's super clean. Obviously, our groundskeeping and team doing a great job. So at first it was, but now I've been in, a few times just this week alone, and it's starting to feel a little bit more normal. People working in their offices, obviously everyone making sure that we're socially distant, when we're working. We still don't have one-to-one meetings or larger meetings. So it started to feel a little bit more normal. The nicest part, honestly, is just like walking into a stadium again and being reminded that, we have sports and entertainment, and hopefully that's coming back soon, and seeing the green grass, and looking at the field and the video board, and just dying for people to be able to experience that again with them. I mean, that's part of our job and part of what we love to do, just like the players love when there's fans in the stands. It's the same kind of rush that we get in the front office of fans in the stands, and we get energy from that. So it's been tough, but I think we're turning a corner, it feels like, and hopefully so.
I need you to tantalize us. What's the field looking like right now?
Oh, it's perfect as always. I mean, we have like the best grounds crew in minor league baseball. They do a phenomenal job. Leah and Adam keeping everything up right now. I know that they're mowing it very often. It looks beautiful. I mean, I can't get into the specifics because I don't know the specifics, but it looks amazing.
You're not going to get into the fertilizer specifics and the irrigation specifics for us?
I don't claim to know those things. So,
okay.
So I don't think, I don't know if we're going with Scott's here or
or what's the other one? It's Scott's Turf Builder.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, the other one's Turf Builder, but it's
Scott's
Turf Builder. Gosh, there's another one, and I can't think of it right now. Vigoro is the other one. Man, I've spent way too much time. You could totally tell I'm a guy in my mid-30s. I've spent too much time at this point at the hardware stores. Yes. By the way, there's a great piece on renoaces.com about you and the community. I had no idea that you were an assistant coach for the freshman boys basketball team at Hug High School. How in the world did you get into that?
Yeah, well, actually, our previous PR communications manager, Jackson Gaskins, shout out to Jackson, was a coach for them last year, and put me in contact with the coaching staff at the end of the season prior to this last one. And I expressed my interest in wanting to coach, and they had a need of volunteers. So when fall ball kind of picked up, we started having opening gyms. I made sure I was going and connecting and learning from the coaching staff, their philosophies, and getting connected with the kids. And I was lucky enough that they put me on the staff for the season, and it was an incredibly rewarding and an amazing experience. One that, I truly hope to continue beyond just last year. It was awesome, man. I can't gush enough about it.
How's your X's and O's game when it comes to hoops?
Yeah, I mean, it goes way back. I've been coaching basketball since I was in the 8th grade, or I want to say 8th graders since I was in high school with my dad. Obviously being more of a shorter person, my skills were limited on the court. So I knew early on that, off the court would be my overall involvement with any sport. And basketball for me, was one of my dad's favorite sports. So I learned a lot about X's and O's from him. But then I went to school at St. John's, which is a huge basketball school in the Big East. So
Shout out to Chris Mullen.
Shout out to Chris Mullen. Going to all the Johnny's games when I was there, learning, talking basketball with my friends, with anyone that would. I covered basketball a little bit. So talking with coaches and stuff like that kind of got me a good, strong basis. And then out here, obviously getting involved with coaching itself. And again, since high school, it was a treat. But my X's and O's, man, I like to, be aggressive on defense. Offensively, slow the game down a little bit, but it really depends on your players.
So you're running a system offensively.
Absolutely. So we at Hug, the varsity team has an offense that they run with certain set plays. I'm obviously not going to divulge what that is.
Oh, come on.
We try to institute that, at the freshman level, and it has to do with really our wing players getting dribble handoffs from the guards, bringing the ball up the court, and then making action off of that on the offensive end. So kind of reading that pick and roll, seeing how to read that, whether it's driving, passing, running another pick and roll. So it's kind of an offense that you read off of the first or second roll on the wing and work from there. And then defensively for me, I love to play the 1-3-1, and we did that this year in the half court, play it in the full court, play around with it. It's not a defense that kids at a younger level see very often. So if you can execute it properly towards the end of the season, we're able to give people a lot of trouble playing that in an extended 2-3 kind of half court trap. So I can get into the X's.
Wow, look at you. if you, by the way, if you want to follow, I'm going to give him a Twitter shout out. It's at Hugs Hawks Hoops. So just like, the words Hugs Hawks Hoops, at Hugs Hawks Hoops, which is a tongue twister. And I am impressed that I spit it out cleanly. You can go follow Hugs Hawks Hoops and see what's going on over there. Maybe check out some of Vince's X's and O's games.
Yeah, stay up to date. Hopefully we can have a season next year. We built something, and we're trying to build a program under Zack and his leadership with the program. So we're just trying to build that up and see where we can go. So really excited for next year. Stay in contact with our kids here in the off season. They're itching to get back in the gym. So it should be a fun time.
I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up what the Aces are doing for high school seniors too. Do you have any insight on that?
I do, yeah. So we are asking for submissions for high school senior baseball players that we can honor through our social media channels, hopefully put them on our video board at the stadium, and just be able to recognize those players that play locally at all of the different high schools that didn't get a chance to participate in their final season. So just an opportunity for us to highlight them and hopefully we get a lot of submissions and we can push that out there from local friends and family. So we're encouraging all of that through my coaching in the community and obviously now in being involved with this program, just seeing how passionate and different our high schools are just in the Reno area. Something I hadn't really known a lot about until I got involved with it of just how different, the different communities are throughout Reno. Just one city has all of these 5 or 6 different high schools that are really diverse in how their backgrounds are. And it's really a special place. I think the high school community is really awesome here, especially in regards to high school athletics and supporting kids and getting them involved to keep them out of trouble. So anything that we can do at the Aces, as we've shown, we will to do that and try to promote that and show how great this community is locally.
If somebody knows somebody that they want recognized, how do they go about getting it to you guys, getting you guys the information and following through?
Yep, we're still getting the program up and running. So I'll say visit renoaces.com. There'll be more information there. Obviously, subscribe to our newsletter. We'll put the information there and on our social media channels as well. So you're up to date with the Reno Aces. You should be able to get this information. And like I said, we're encouraging everybody to participate, and we want to try to get as many people onto our feeds and onto our video board as possible.
Love the idea, man. This is not something that I particularly enjoy talking about, but as baseball fans, I feel like maybe we need to address the labor situation going on in baseball right now. Really tough to watch, I would say, as a baseball fan. There are so many different layers to it. especially when you start to get into the minor league portion of it, because there's some minor leaguers, especially at the AAA level, that are 40-man guys, and they fall into the players union category. Then you have guys that aren't 40-man guys, and they're not part of the players union and not protected by the players union. That's just the tip of the iceberg. You have the gulf right now between the players and the owners as far as, prorated pay and all that stuff. But for me, it's been kind of sad to watch, and I hope that baseball can kind of get it together here the next couple of weeks. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, a similar one. As a fan, I'm really disappointed and really devastated as a diehard baseball fan on what's kind of transpired over the last few weeks. I just feel that baseball had a tremendous opportunity to go out and showcase the sport and be a healing power across America as the first sport back. America's pastime traditionally being the first sport back and giving us that in early July. To get caught up in money and semantics when we're talking about billionaires and millionaires, it's hard to digest for a lot of people, including myself, especially people that work within the industry, that's seen how affected people have been at the major league level, at the minor league level with their jobs already without the season or a shortened season. And some people are without paychecks, where other people look at the players and you've made how many millions last year and you're gonna still make how many millions this year. Is it all really that worth it to fight over? I don't know. So I've kind of entered the mode of, I don't need to know the day-to-day stuff anymore. I'm over it. Just tell me if you're going to play or not.
Yeah. Tell me when you have a deal.
Yes or no. Like, just let us know. Because following it day to day has just become too much pain. I want to say, as a baseball player, as a baseball fan, it's grown up loving the sport and wanting to be a part of it.
The other day I saw a great, it was a tweet thread from Sean Doolittle, who I know, who was in Stockton a couple of times around. So I got to know him, and one of the great guys in the game. I think that comes through via his social media. But he had an interesting tweet thread about, hey, for people that don't understand, he said, basically, I understand that you don't understand because it is billionaires and millionaires. But basically, the players right now feel like it's on them to try and set the precedent for the players union moving forward. Because as we're going to talk with Rads about, he's going to bring it up that, there's another CBA that needs to get done. So there's the idea of setting precedents. And I know it's hard for people like us to look in all that, but if you put it in a vacuum, really, you're talking about money, like a big piece of the pie that's there, and figuring out a way to divide it up. Yes, you're going to make millions as a player, but I mean, they should earn those millions because there is the revenue there, and they are the workforce basically that is generating the money. And it's really hard, I think, for the everyday fan to have that compute, but I think you can't lose sight of that also. Does that make sense?
Oh, I think absolutely. I think it's a double-edged sword in this case, where these are extreme circumstances, and you're looking at an ownership bunch that's saying we're only going to pay this much for a season, pretty much. And so the players just need to decide, I think, how many games is that worth? How much are we going to take? Is it the minimum of 30 or 40 to 50 games, or are we willing to extend ourselves a little bit more? Precedent's huge here, and I understand that, but also just the unique of the times with the revenues that aren't coming in for the owners as well. It's not you can't look at this season in a traditional sense, in my opinion, and say, they're sharing revenues only at this percentage. Well, they're doing it because their revenues have been greatly impacted. You know what I mean? And so it's different now. So, that precedent thing, it's like I said, it's a double-edged sword. I see it one way, and then the other way I can see as well, where this is such a unique circumstance, and there's so many people hurting in the industry already that by coming back, you can save thousands probably of jobs and at least get that going. And that's not all of it, but that's some of it, by getting that going. And then thinking about the long-term benefits of baseball, looking at what happened in 1994 with the strike, and people didn't really come back until you had the steroid era that brought them back into baseball. But the time being, that really hurt the sport. So how much damage are you doing by having this fight or not having a season needs to be weighed a lot as well, because it could have been an opportunity for baseball to grow early on.
Well, on to happier things. We're going to have Rads on. Ryan Radtke's coming on here next. But before we get into Ryan, I want to ask if you have a favorite Ryan Radtke call.
I do, yeah. As a kind of a newer Aces fan, coming to Nevada in 2018 for the 2018 season, I should say I have a little bit less of a memory of the calls back, but I would say the most memorable one for me would be the Cody Decker walk off home run. He, the backstory of Cody, he's told the story many times that he had told everyone that he was retiring in the clubhouse. Obviously, Radtke had that inclination as well, some of us in the front office. Hearing Ryan call that without the fans kind of knowing that backdrop and him still delivering a dramatic walk-off call, but you could hear the emotion deep in his voice. I thought that was just an incredible call. I've heard it a million times. That's one of the highlights, for me that gives me goosebumps. So that goes down for me, but I'm sure, some Aces fans and Radtke himself can provide some better ones or some ones in greater detail about the history of the Aces and ones that probably will hit on the heartstrings of some.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to talk with Rads and hear from him. I think most Aces fans will be. So we're going to take a break. We'll come back. We'll hear from Ryan Radtke, the original voice of the Reno Aces, and then Vince will come back and help me close out the podcast here in a little bit. This is the Aces Loaded podcast. We're back with Rads after this. Hi, I'm Zack Bayrouty. Welcome to This Week in Aces History, powered by Eide Bailly. Each week, we will highlight significant moments from the club's past. On June 13th, 2012, the Aces collected 17 hits in a 13-5 win over the Colorado Springs Sky Sox. A.J. Pollock, Ryan Wheeler, Taylor Harbin, and Brent Cleveland each collected 3 hits. On June 14th, 2015, the Aces defeated Memphis 4-3 behind a franchise record 5 double plays. Thanks for listening to the Aces Loaded podcast. That was This Week in Aces History, powered by Eide Bailly. We'll be right back. We are back on the Aces Loaded podcast. Great to have you along. And we are joined by maybe the most special guest we've had on Aces Loaded, because he is, I don't know if I should still call him the voice of the Aces, because I have yet to do a game holding that title, but the original voice of the Reno Aces for 11 seasons dating back to 2009. Ryan Radtke, also former voice of the Nevada Wolfpack, and of course now currently with Westwood One. We've been waiting to have Rads on, and he's finally on. So how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. I'm hanging in like everybody else. Just, we were talking about a little while ago, taking it day by day and just, hoping that we can get past this thing and get back to normalcy at some point. But it's definitely been an interesting time for everybody, I think.
Well, I just want to let you know that my first season in the PCL is going great.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad it's just been smooth sailing for you.
I always dreamed it would be. It's so weird. Obviously everything's weird right now, but I never thought I would see, let's go back to March. Like, I never thought I'd see the NCAA tournament canceled. I never thought we'd see that, just because of what it means and the revenue it generates. And I think for me, coming back from the WCC tournament on March 11th, I think it was, and then the NBA that night shutting things down, that to me was when everything became real. You were getting ready to do the tournament for Westwood One. When did everything really become real for you?
Yeah, so, we were in Vegas at the same time, Zach. I was over at, I did the Mountain West tournament final, and then I did the Pac-12 women's final. The Pac-12 women's game was on Sunday, so I flew home on Monday. And, being there at the Pac-12, you were starting to hear more of it. It was kind of interesting that almost overnight, the hand sanitizing stations that popped up all around the arena. I mean, you couldn't walk 50 feet, it felt like, without one. And there was a lot more discussion about it and things like that. And then as I came home and I started seeing the news reports, and it was like, okay, maybe this is more serious than we've been led to believe. And then sure enough, the night the NBA shut everything down, I think was when everybody went, whoa, okay, this is beyond what we thought. I was supposed to go back to Vegas for the Pac-12 men's tournament on Friday, and I had a morning flight. My bosses asked me to push that back to do an evening flight. I think it was Thursday, not Friday, but to do an evening flight because they weren't sure what was going to happen. And then sure enough, they announced that was canceled. And right then, I think I knew that everything else was in trouble. We got an email telling us, hey, just stay ready. We're not sure. At that time, the NCAA was saying maybe we can play without fans. There was talk about either us going to arenas and doing games with no fans, or possibly about going to a studio somewhere and doing them. And then, of course, the decision was made very quickly after that to shut everything down. And, looking back, I mean, I applaud Adam Silver for the decision he made, because I think without it, we may not have seen the quick action we did from everybody else. And it turns out that it was the right decision. And, none of us thought we'd be going through this, but here's where we are. And so, we have to try to make the best of it, and hopefully some good comes out of it.
I hosted a Zoom cast for Pacific the other day with the Where Are They Now? It was an alumni roundtable, and one of my guests was Heather Cox of NBC. And I'll ask you what I asked her, because I think you'd have great insight on this too. Do you think this changes the dynamics of what we do as broadcasters moving forward? Like, do you think what's going to happen now when these sports get started, where there's going to be the distancing, is going to set a precedent as far as the mechanics that we have and the ability to do our job? Do you think that'll change at all after this?
I think the easy answer to that question is yes. And in the short term, I would say yes. In the long term, I don't know. It probably depends on kind of where we go from here. Because right now, with what we're going through, it's very easy to say, okay, everything has to change. Things have to be completely different. But if you look around the country, I think you're already seeing signs that some people are saying, no, I don't want it to be different. I want it to go back to normal. So depending on what happens with vaccines and whatnot, we'll see. I think in the immediacy, it's very easy to say, yep, everything's going to change. It's going to be totally different than what we've been used to. But is that going to be true 3-4 years from now, when this is something that is in our rearview mirror? I don't know that I'm willing to say that this is going to lead to permanent change in what we do. But definitely in the short term, yeah. I mean, I think we're already seeing it where they're talking about, with the NBA coming back, potentially having people do those games from studios, or maybe at the very least moving them off the court and moving them up a little bit. I don't think you're going to see the one-on-one interactions that we have. I think a lot of that is still going to be done virtually. I don't think you're going to see media storming into locker rooms after games anytime soon. So I definitely think we are going to see a lot of changes in the short term, but let's see where we are in a couple of years before we start making predictions about it.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to see where it goes selfishly, as I'm sure you are too, because this is what we do, and we've operated a certain way for so long and gotten used to that rhythm. Mm-hmm. You're supposed to be at the Olympics. Was it right now, or when was that going to be?
That would have been at the end of July that I was set to go to Tokyo, and that was interesting as well. I mean, for a long time they kept saying, no, we're going to do this even after everything else had shut down. And I know there was conversations being had about, all right, are you still comfortable going? They're telling us that this is a go. So how do you feel about it? And things like that. But, ultimately, again, I think they made the right decision, bringing people together from all over the world and putting them into one small bubble, so to speak, that was not really a bubble. I think could have had disastrous consequences. So they made the right decision on that front.
What were you going to cover at the Olympics?
That was kind of still up in the air without getting into too much behind the scenes details. We had some conversations going back and forth, and things were shifting around. It was kind of dependent on this and that. So it hadn't been completely decided yet. So I was studying up on a lot of different things just to be ready, just in case.
I was going to say, how does that work? The Olympics are a different animal. You have to, if you're doing a sport with which you're not familiar, you really have to do your homework and get familiar with it. How does that work for you when you go take that kind of assignment?
Yeah, I mean, really, it is just trying to get as familiar as you can with what's going on in the sport, the terminology, and all those different things. And I think I learned from my experience in 2018 in South Korea that there's actually a lot more of these things, these events that are out there to consume than you think there are. You just have to find them. And once you find them and you can start watching them and start getting a little more ingrained, so to speak, in what's going on. So, it's fine. And it's setting the DVR sometimes for things that are on at 3 in the morning and making sure you have them and diving into YouTube and just starting to look at all the different websites and do as much research as you can. I would have had plenty of notice. I would think by, probably by the beginning of May at the latest, I think we would have all had our assignments concretely, and that would have given us a couple months to just focus on, the 2 or 3 individual sports we would be covering at that point.
I know you'd stepped away from the Aces. That being said, with what's going on right now, are you still mourning the loss of a baseball season in the same way or a similar way you would have been had you still, been in the PCL?
That's a great question, Zach. I think in some ways, yes, but in other ways, with what's going on right now between the Players Association and the owners, it's kind of put a sour taste in my mouth, to be honest with you. And I think that has probably led to a change in my attitude where at one point, I was really optimistic that they were going to look at this and say, man, we have a chance to do something that's going to be awesome. We can come back first. We can set the stage. We can set the example. And instead, it's just broken down into an argument over money, like it seemingly always does. And so at this point, I've kind of stopped reading the daily updates about the negotiations and things like that. I've kind of taken more the attitude of, let me know when you're back. And at that point, I'm sure I'll watch. I'm not going to tell you that, I'm not going to watch when the games are on. But I'm just really disappointed the way that the whole thing has come together.
I was going to say, how do you reconcile this both as a fan and someone who works and has worked in the game? Because you could see both sides of the argument, but yet it still does leave that sour taste in your mouth, like you said, where you're thinking to yourself, man, can't these people just figure it out? How do you reconcile what's going on and move forward as a baseball fan after this?
It's hard to reconcile in a lot of ways because you're right. I mean, while, quote unquote negotiations have taken place, it doesn't feel like anybody's really negotiating. It just feels like both sides are kind of entrenched and keep throwing out the same thing, thinking either one side is going to cave or not really caring if one side caves. And I think this is where, fans are going to have to decide. People have said to me before about this whole thing, baseball's ruining themselves. They're going to ruin the sport. And I've said to some, why would anybody think that? We went through this in 81. Everybody came back. We went through this in 94, canceled the World Series, the worst thing that baseball possibly could have done. Everybody at that point said, it's over. They're done. Everybody came back. They have, billion-dollar television contracts. So if you're the players or owners, I can see where you're sitting there listening to people say, you guys are going to ruin this. And they're going, what are you talking about? We've done this many times before, and it's never had a lasting impact. So, until fans really decide that they've had enough and they're done, I don't know that this culture is going to change. And I think the sad thing for baseball is we're going through all this right now, and we're about to go through it again because the CBA is up. And so if they find a way to play this year, which hopefully they will, and play in 2021, the offseason between 21 and 22, this is all set up to happen again. So I'm just hoping that, cooler heads can prevail on both sides. They can figure out the opportunity they have. They can figure out a way to come together and get their issues ironed out and get back on the field and play, because there's plenty of blame to go around on both sides. Anybody who blames one side and not the other isn't really looking at the totality of the issues. There's plenty of blame to go around. Hopefully they can just get together, figure it out, and get back out there and play.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, this has happened before, but in this climate, it's pretty unprecedented. So it's really going to be interesting to see where they go from here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, everything's unprecedented right now, right? I mean, we've never seen anything like this in our lifetime. So, hopefully they will. But, as somebody else pointed out to me the other day, if you look at the history of baseball labor negotiations, almost always it comes down to the 11th hour before something gets done. And so they may have to, at some point, set that deadline and make that the drop dead, so to speak, and hopefully be able to get something done by that point. And then be able to move on, and then hopefully use that as a springboard to start negotiating things so we don't have to go through this again after the 21 season.
I want to get into your story a little bit selfishly too, because I don't think we ever had this conversation. When did you know you wanted to get into play-by-play?
A long time ago. I played sports growing up. had always been something that I really enjoyed doing. But once I got into high school and started playing basketball, and it became pretty evident to me that my career wasn't going any further than that. I started thinking, I'd love to stay in sports, and I'd love to figure out a way to be around it. And I'd always been interested in broadcasting. That's when I really started to dive into it. And there was a couple things that kind of pushed me into it. One was the high school that I went to had their own TV station. And so at one point, the basketball coach came to me after he told me that I wasn't going to make the team that year, and asked if I would be interested in broadcasting their games. So I started doing that. And then around that same time, we had a family friend who had a connection with the San Francisco Giants, and was able to go and sit in the radio booth with those guys one night. And that was just a great experience for me. And I think it was coming out of that that I really decided this is what I want to do with my life, and kind of threw myself into it. And lo and behold, here we are.
Yeah, in this business, everybody has a unique story, and it can be really fun to hear. Who was your biggest influence when you were starting to learn the craft?
No doubt it was Bill King. I loved Bill King. I listened to Bill King all the time. I like to tell people that I feel like I'm very fortunate that I grew up in an era where we were still a ways away from every game being on television. When I was a kid, and early on, third, fourth grade, there was probably, I don't know, 30, maybe 40 A's games a year that were on TV. And of course, you had those marked on the calendar, and that was, man, I'm coming home from school, I'm doing my homework right away so I can make sure that I watch the game. But the rest of the time, for those games that weren't on, we were always listening on the radio. And whether that was, I was the kid that had the little transistor radio that I would sneak into my bedroom. So after my parents said, no, it's time to go to bed, I could turn it on and listen.
Mm-hmm.
If we were driving somewhere, we were always listening to the game. If we were outside, on a Saturday and the grill was going, the game was on the radio. And so listening to Bill King was one of the huge influences on me. And of course, at that time, the A's had not just Bill King, but Lon Simmons in the booth. So they had two Hall of Famers paired together. And so listening to those guys was an absolute treat. And then on the time when the A's, weren't on, the game was over, they had an off day, whatever, we were flipping over to the Giants game. I wasn't a Giants fan, but Hank Greenwald was doing the games, and he was remarkable. And so spent some time listening to those guys. And, being able to grow up in the Bay Area, a place that has such an amazing tradition of broadcasters, was really a blessing in my life, I think.
It's funny you mentioned Bill King. My Cal League colleagues and I do a Zoom, we call it a Thirsty Thursday Zoom chat every Thursday night. And last Thursday we had Ken Korak on. Ken came and just kind of hung out for about an hour and a half, and he told some great Bill King stories. And there's a litany of them. I read. Did you read Ken's book on Bill? Holy
Yeah.
Toledo.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite Bill story from being a listener?
Oh my goodness, there are so many. There's some that I've read about that were before my time. The Mother's Day incident when he was doing the Warriors games and he thought his mic was off, and he
Ken brought that up.
Yeah, called the referee a specific name, and it was broadcast out over the airwaves. And turns out Franklin Muley, who owned the Warriors, paid Bill's fine. And then for years, I think it was Ed Rush, would exchange cards on Mother's Day, which I thought was great. There were stories about that used to just come up in random games about how they'd be in a hotel, and after the game, the guys would be walking back to their room, and Bill would see a room service tray that, somebody had set outside their door to be picked up. Well, if there was a roll on there, Bill might just pick up the roll and start eating it, or he might, grab a pat of butter, and start eating it. I think it was Hank Greenwald tells the story about how when Bill was doing the Warriors games, he used to toss popcorn into his mouth.
Yeah, Ken was saying that too.
Yeah, and then he would have his knee would be going, and it would almost be in rhythm with what he was saying, and it was like how he kept the tempo during games. But there was so many. I mean, the thing I loved about Bill is Bill told you the truth, and it didn't matter if the A's were good, if they were bad. Bill was going to tell you exactly what was going on, and he did not care. So to hear Bill tell you that, it was one of the most boneheaded plays he had ever seen or something, you would just laugh, but it was like, he's right. Everybody else is thinking that. And he had the credibility to be able to say that. And people that listen to Bill for years know that whether it was the Warriors or the Raiders or the A's, you were going to get the exact story from Bill, and sometimes very colorfully. The Holy Roller game, Madden wants to know if it's real. they tell him, yes, get your big butt out of here. The Raiders have won the football game. There's nothing real in the world anymore. His ability to capture those moments was just remarkable. And to this day, one of the real seminal moments, I think, for me, Scott Hatterberg's home run for the A's 20th consecutive win. Bill's call is just burned into my memory, and really one of the greats that I've ever heard.
It's funny that you have an influence like Bill, and I think we all strive to maybe implement some stylistic qualities from the people that influenced us. You talk about Bill giving that unvarnished truth. Do you think that's something that we can do today, or do you think that's going to be kind of from a bygone era in terms of broadcasting? And I know we're getting deep into the broadcasting weeds here, but for me, this is something that always is on my mind when I'm on a call.
Yeah, I think if you have the credibility to do it, then absolutely. I know early in my career, I kind of came in with that idea that, hey, I'm going to tell the absolute truth all the time. And, sometimes like my first year doing baseball, that didn't go over real well because I was the new guy and hey, who is this guy to be saying this? And I think what I learned over time was that if you tell the truth, players and everybody else will respect you, but there's also ways to tell the truth. You can say that it wasn't a great play without saying it was the worst play in the history of baseball. And
John Miller did that, right? To
right.
Worst base running in the history of the game.
Yeah.
I forget who the guy was, but
I think it was Ruben Rivera.
Ruben Rivera, yep.
Yeah. And look, hey, John Miller's got all the credibility in the world. John can say that, and nobody's going to bat an eye, and that's fine. Vin Scully could have said whatever he wanted, and that was fine. I think what I learned from talking to people as I kind of grew in my career was, hey, it's fine to tell the truth, but just make sure that you keep in mind too how hard the game is to play. And I think we can kind of lose sight of that from time to time. Look, if we could have played the game at that level, we wouldn't be in this business. We would have been playing it. And so, look, over time, it became, hey, that's a play that's got to be made. And the guy that booted the play knows that.
He'll tell you that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's nothing wrong in saying that because everybody can agree with that. But when you turn it into, what in the world is this guy thinking? How do you make that play? He should be released immediately, things like that. You're crossing a line at that point. So you have to be able to tell the truth, but I think also do it with some compassion as well.
I like that. How different was it for you going from regional events to national events, covering them?
Not a whole lot, which probably sounds incorrect, but it really wasn't. When I first made the transition, they basically told me, like, listen, we still want enthusiasm and we still want you to approach this in the same way, but just realize instead of broadcasting for one team or one market, you're broadcasting for both teams and many markets. And so, the enthusiasm, should shine through on both sides, which really wasn't that big of a deal to me because, again, if the A's were playing the Orioles and Cal Ripken made a great diving play, Bill King was going to tell you that Cal Ripken just made an unbelievable play, as opposed to some other areas of the country where you might get, ground ball in the hole, it's short, diving play gets up, throws the first inning over, things like that. So it really wasn't that difficult for me. I think there was probably more preparation that went into it because, look, when you're covering one team all the time, as you well know, Zach, that team inside and out. So really it's trying to learn about the other team in the days or weeks leading up to the game. Now you're starting fresh every week, basically, with a couple teams. So there's probably more preparation that went in, more hours spent watching tape and things like that. Those were probably the biggest adjustments.
How did you grow? In what ways did you grow as a broadcaster in your 11 years with the Aces? How did that help you along? And I know I've been asked that with my time in Stockton, which was 14 years, and it's a tough one to answer, but if you could kind of distill it, what would you say?
I think it was just, with each passing year, there's new groups of people that you deal with. And I think over time, and as you get older and you do that more and more, you just learn how to interact with people. And I think that's where I got a lot better, I think, over my years. I'm not a real social person. I've never been someone that has a large group of friends. I've never been the life of the party type guy. And so in some ways, baseball clubhouses could be tough for me, especially early on, because I didn't want to just walk in and start having a conversation, have somebody from across the room jump in and throw their 2 cents in. So I think I got better at that as it went along. I mean, I definitely grew as a person, just having to deal with different personalities and figuring out how to do that, and realizing that, my opinion on something was not the be all end all. It was okay to engage in discussion, and also, just different personalities. There are some, like, I mean, you've seen this over your time. There are some managers that are complete 180s from the others, and I definitely saw that in my time in Reno. Phil Nevin was very, very different from Brett Butler, but I got along great with both those guys, and I'm glad I did, and I'm glad I had the experiences that I had with those people.
Yeah, handling the staffs and interacting with the staffs, I think would be top on my list of how I've been able to grow conversationally and also as a broadcaster behind the mic. We're rounding the home stretch here before we got to let you go. So I want to go with a couple of bullet points here, and I'm gonna have you rapid fire give me these answers.
Okay.
Best PCL road restaurant. And by the way, this is a little bit selfish on my part because I'm asking you for the advanced scout on some of these things. Best PCL road restaurant.
That is a really, really tough one. Man, Moochie's in Salt Lake City is tough to beat. Best cheesesteaks on the West Coast you're ever going to have. Salt Lake City actually has quite a few. I'll send you a list because
Okay.
there's plenty that you need to try. The barbecue in Texas, when you get to Round Rock, the barbecue there's just a couple of amazing places that you need to hit. Rudy's is one of my favorites, which is a little more, kind of fast, casual type barbecue. That's one of the all-time best ones. The Salt Lake barbecue is maybe the best barbecue I've had in my life.
I've never had that. I've always wanted to have Salt Lake.
Salt Lake I would recommend you get the rental car, you make the drive. It's about a 45-minute drive, but it's well worth it.
Noted. Best PCL hotel on the road.
Hotel Murano in Tacoma, without a doubt. It's as close to a big league hotel as you're going to see.
Favorite road ballpark / press box.
Oh, man. As much as it's kind of deteriorated over the years, Memphis is still really, really cool. It's a neat place to go. I've always enjoyed going to that ballpark. And I'm trying to think of the other ones that I would put up there. I do love, despite the fact I'm not a huge fan of the setup, I always loved going to Sacramento, I think, because it was a short trip. In a league full of long trips, it was a short trip, and that was nice.
It's a nice press box. A nice view of the Tower Bridge in Sac. I've done a couple of games there. Most memorable Aces moment that you've called?
2012 championship game in Omaha, and seeing that team win. That was pretty neat after coming into the league in 2009 and then watching them win a championship in 12. That was pretty cool. Followed closely by Game 5 of 2014 where the Aces lost. Not the game itself, but the memory of that clubhouse after the game is something that I will never forget. I don't think I've ever seen a group of guys that wanted to win more, and unfortunately they came up short. And I remember there was a player, and I don't want to use his name just because I don't know, he probably wouldn't care.
Sure.
But, he came after the game. He was sobbing in tears that they had lost. Phil Nevin called him into his office and told him he was going to the big leagues, and he just continued to sob.
Wow.
And it was almost like, great, well, I'm going to the big leagues, but we didn't win. And it was just seeing that group and how badly they wanted to win. That was pretty neat to see that. Special
Clubhouses at the minor league level are extra special because it's such a hodgepodge and it's such a game of chance with the makeup of a clubhouse. So when you get those, I get it. We've had those in Stockton before. It's pretty cool, and those are always the memorable ones.
If I can just interject real quick.
Yeah, please.
2011 Aces team, my absolute favorite for that reason, the clubhouse. Just great guys, so much fun to be around every day.
Last but not least, what advice would you impart to the next Aces broadcaster?
What advice would I impart to the next Aces broadcaster? Invest in a heater. You're going to need it early on in the season.
I had 3 ready to go, man. I had them all lined up, ready to go. I have them.
And then invest in a fan because you'll need that shortly after you don't need the heaters anymore. But no, go in, be yourself, do a great job. And I mean, obviously fans got to hear your work last year, and I think they already know that they're getting a fantastic broadcaster in the booth, and they're going to have a great ride listening to you describe the action because they know what kind of pro you are already.
Thanks, Rads. It means a lot. And I've always said I'm honored that the Aces chose me to follow you, but I'm even more honored to follow you because I know what you're all about, and you're all class, man. You're the best, and that's why you're doing what you're doing now. Rads, thanks for making the time, and hopefully I'll see you in Reno soon, and we can grab lunch, or maybe you can come hang out in the booth for an Aces game, which would
sounds
be
great,
surreal.
Zach. I'm looking forward to it. I hope it happens sooner rather than later, as long as we can do it safely. That's the main thing right now, and hopefully we can get to that point where we'll all be able to get back together. We'll all be able to watch the sports that we love and be able to do it safely. I'm looking forward to it.
Amen. Me too, brother. The original voice of the Reno Aces, Ryan Radtke. We're back to close out the Aces Loaded podcast after this.
One. Here comes the pitch. Swinging a drive into deep left center. That ball's headed for the wall. It is gone. It's gone. The Aces win. Cody Decker with a game-winning two-run home run. And the Aces have walked off Sacramento. 10-9 is the final. Decker jumps on top of home plate, and his teammates jump on him. What a game. What a finish. Cody Decker with a two-run home run to left center field, and the Aces win 10-9. Unbelievable. Decker walking towards the dugout. He's going with the forearm bash. He's hugging his coaches, hugging his teammates. What a moment for Cody Decker. Off and on the injured list all year, and coming up in that spot, he crushes one off Yandel Gustave to left center field.
We are back to close out the Aces Loaded podcast. Vince Ruffino joining me again. Our thanks to Ryan Radtke for coming on. Always love hearing from Ryan, and what a career he had in Reno. It would have been great to hear him call the Olympics this summer. Obviously, it's not going to happen this summer, hopefully down the road in the not too distant future, but he's a hell of a guy, man.
I could listen to Rads talk for 2 hours because when you guys were listening, recording, I was just fully entrenched. Like I could listen to him talk over anything: golf, baseball, marble racing on the Ocho. Like if he's ever interested, whatever it is, he just, the way he delivers a story is fantastic, and that's why he's gotten to the position that he has. We're incredibly blessed to have had him in Reno for so long, and I can't wait to see where else he continues to go.
Well, and that's not an accident too. It's as far as preparation and doing the work to sound as good as he does. He puts in the work that nobody sees. So that's the key to broadcasting at that level, and that's something I totally admire about Rads, among many other things. RenoAces.com has all kinds of content right now. You've been spearheading a lot of that. Can you tell us, if you go to RenoAces.com, what's in store?
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. We're keeping you guys up to date with our players. So I sat down with Taylor Clark and talked about his pitching philosophy and how he developed that over time. So you can check out that story. We also have a really great story about how we host special needs camp every summer. They come out before a game, play a game with our players, talk to a few players about that. There's some great quotes in there from our guys talking about what that moment means to them every year, and how that makes an impact. And we have a couple other stories about players and their dads. David Calvert, our team photographer who's been on the podcast, has been contributing photos and sharing his memories of taking those photos and giving context for that. So keep checking out our website. We'll keep people up to date and entertained. And then as soon as baseball comes back, we'll hope to keep you up to date on that as well.
And you can get your BLC gear and any other Aces gear you'd like. Team store is open. Vince has the hat on. If you're watching on the video, you see that. Before I let you go, any cool places you've eaten in town since establishments are starting to reopen in Reno?
Oh, yeah. Recently, I went to Bricky's, which is over, I believe, on 2nd, near downtown. And the burger was absolutely amazing. I had been told that for a long time I needed to get a burger there, and I did. I got jalapenos, bacon, cheddar. And then there was homemade potato salad, which was really, really, really good. So shout out to them. They did a phenomenal job. And I've gone a few times recently to the Big Horde Tavern, which is near my apartment. They actually have really phenomenal food as well, whether it be a burger, you want to go for brunch, whatever. Those are some two local eateries that I've been enjoying the last week or so.
Good. Really important to support local businesses right now, especially as they start to reopen. If you can, if it's safe for you to do so, if you're not at risk, obviously, we are encouraging you to go out and support the places that support the community. So I'm glad you got to a couple places. I'm going to have to get up there probably in the next couple of weeks and check out both those places.
Definitely, yeah. If you need a list of places to go, there's definitely a lot of strong recommendations. It's great having restaurants back open where you can go and like I said, find some normalcy. So hopefully that will continue and we all stay safe and can continue to support our local businesses that need it right now.
Totally. Vince, thanks, man. Thanks for being on. Thanks for producing. You're doing double duty this week, so appreciate you.
It's great to be on camera this time. Normally I'm behind the scenes, but
that's nice. It's nice to see you occasionally. Thanks to Ryan Radtke, the original voice of the Reno Aces. My name is Zack Bayrouty. So long. We'll see you next time on Aces Loaded.